Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night book study. We are studying Christian Anarchism by Alexander Christianopoulos. And if you've been with us before, you'll know that he started that as his doctoral thesis. And the purpose was to try to get together all the writings from all the people who've been writing about Christian anarchism all in one place. So he's done that as many people have done that, and the most prominent among them is, of course, Leo Tolstoy. We have now finished our study of the Resist Not Evil section, which we did maybe half a dozen weeks, because that is the main subject in the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount has maybe 6 or 8 main subjects, and within the subject of Resist Not Evil were another 5 or 6 sub-chapters. So we went through them for 6 or 7 weeks or so. And now we are going to go to the next point that Jesus is making in the Sermon on the Mount, which is the Judge Not section. And it's a relatively short chapter, but there's a lot of stuff in it, so we're probably going to be reading almost all of it. It's in my abridged version of the book. It's on page 47. You may have the downloaded PDF version, so you may not know. It's point number 1.2, Judge Not, if you want to follow along in your version. And it starts out right away. So it starts out with, anarchism follows not just from non-resistance to evil, but also from other key passages in the Sermon on the Mount. So what I want to say about that is that, and we have touched on that before, that Christianity and anarchism are not the same. They're not one and the same. They are separate. And the way it works is that if you are a Christian and you follow the teachings of Christ, then you will end up with an anarchist society. So in other words, anarchism is inherent in Christianity. Now, it is almost guaranteed that you can find elements of anarchism way before Jesus' time in other philosophies around the world. I can't prove that, or I don't really know for sure, but I would be very much surprised if that's not the case. Anarchism is a relatively new phenomenon, at least after it was baptized by, I believe, Kropotkin was the first one to use the term about this. And that's only, I believe, somewhere in the mid-19th century or so. There were a whole slew of people writing at that time. But the main point is that anarchism follows from Christianity. One of these passages that kind of illustrates this is the passage in where Jesus talks about not judging. And I'm reading from the the Old King James Version, because that is the version that Tolstoy used when he was doing his analysis. So here we go. Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. and with what measure ye mete it shall be measured unto you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in your brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Again, I'm juggling camera and book at the same time, so bear with me. Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. So, what Tolstoy is saying here about that is that people are fundamentally wicked. There's another philosophy, humanism, and I believe that in their view the humans are fundamentally good, and that's it. Christians, I think, believe that humans were created in the image of God, but it didn't take more than a chapter or two in Genesis before they started rebelling against God. So they started out good, and they quickly fell away and became selfish and wicked. So Tolstoy is working from the premise that people are wicked, are depraved, and that is also one of the main philosophies within Reformed theology. We are typically many anarchists, Christian anarchists, came out of the Radical Reformation, and Alexander Christianopoulos is mentioning one Paul Shelshiki, who lived in the 1300s or so. So there was already anarchism back then. And one of the prominent philosophers in Reformed theology is John Calvin, and one of the 5 points that he's making is that humans are totally depraved. So Tolstoy is saying about this, you cannot judge, for all men are blind and do not see the truth. And those who judge and punish are like blind men leading the blind. Moreover, men cannot judge one another's faults, because they are themselves full of wickedness. Since no human being is faultless, castigating other persons for their fault is both ill-advised and hypocritical. So people are depraved and wicked. He says they are full of wickedness, so they should not judge anybody else. And Jesus says in the little passage that we read before, you judge, you better be prepared to be judged. So Tolstoy believes that there is a connection between this passage here about judging and the previous one that we talked about, resist not evil, because he says, Christianopoulos continues here, this in turn further explains why men should not resist evil. So in other words, not judging is like an elaboration of the previous chapter. The two injunctions are connected in that since every man is full of faults and incapable of guiding others, men should not condemn, take revenge, or resist evil. Because one cannot judge evil properly in the first place, to act upon that judgment by resisting the alleged evil is unwise. So instead of judging, Christians should patiently forgive. We talked about forgiveness before, and we also mentioned that living the Christian life is a lot of forgiveness, it's a lot of suffering, and it's a lot of sacrifice. So this is one example of that. Instead of judging, Christians should patiently forgive even what to them looks evil. Ballou, who's another writer of these that Christianopoulos has found, Ballou writes that true followers of Christ deem it their duty to forgive, not punish, to yield unto wrath and suffer wrong without recompensing evil for evil, referring their cause always unto Him who has said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." So, in other words, only God has the right to judge anybody, really. And then he goes into a bit of a discussion about the relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament. Almost all of Tolstoy's writing is focusing on the New Testament. And if we go to more modern writers, actually one of the more prominent writers that we know about now, we may not have been known to Alexander Christianopoulos when he wrote this, is Shane Claiborne and Tony Campolo and one other guy, I forgot the name, but they have formed what they call Red Letter Christians, an organization called Red Letter Christians. And they are definitely focused on Jesus' writings. That doesn't mean that they are. It doesn't mean that they are disregarding the Old Testament. And Jesus never said to disregard the Old Testament. He said about the law, "I'm not here to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." And when Jesus says the law, he could possibly mean the entire Torah, which he was a Jew himself, so that's the scripture that he used, was the Torah, which consists of three things: the law of Moses. It consists of the prophets, who were writers in the Old Testament times, and the writings. The writings are like the Psalms and Proverbs and stuff like that. So when he says that he's not abolishing the law, he seeks to fulfill it, he possibly also means the rest of the Torah. So Christianopoulos goes into a little discussion about that anarchists focus a lot on the New Testament, and that is okay. But just remember that everything that's in the New Testament has its origin in the Old Testament. And there's nothing wrong with the Old Testament. What it says there, it's just that we people have interpreted the Old Testament in the wrong way. Jesus comes to correct that. And that leads to discussion about, again, God's sovereignty. God is the one who judges people. He says, true justice, and that's Eller, another one of these writers who argues, Eller, true justice can only be brought about by Judge Jehovah. So, in other words, only God can judge. So we would better let God do it His way from the outset. The Christian who has faith in God must also have faith in God's judgment and in His execution of justice, which is also why he should abstain from impersonating God and judging his fellow human beings. And that's another way of saying that we should not judge other people. That is God's prerogative. It's his domain. And then he goes on, men are ill-equipped to make laws and judge other men as good or wicked, let alone punish them for it. Because people are imperfect, so any judgment they make on other people will be imperfect as well. And you definitely can't trust them to punish anybody. Hence, while an omniscient God can punish evildoers, it is not to be done by men to men, and the Son of God has bid men not to do it. And that section came from Tolstoy's book, What I Believe, on page 64. That is actually a very excellent book. The book is kind of easy to read. There are even some audio versions, free audio versions on YouTube you can find. And it's a very good little book to listen to. Really explains well how Tolstoy thinks. Judgment is God's prerogative. Hence, Jesus clearly forbade human judgment. So it can't be said any much clearer than that. However startling this may seem, Tolstoy therefore insists that Jesus' instruction not to judge further condemns all earthly tribunals. If we are not supposed to judge and condemn for our fellows, then neither can that be done through courts of justice. So, in other words, he goes on, our judicial system is unchristian. So, anybody who, we talked about that before, anybody who claims that the country was founded on Christian values are just wrong. So courts are, we should not have courts. We should not be associated with courts. We should not do anything with courts because they are flawed by definition. Because they have been invented by people, not God. Our judicial system is unchristian not only because it resists evil, and we can see that the whole justice system we have is based on retaliation, on retribution, on evil, exchanging evil for evil. But also because it involves judging, but both forbidden by Jesus. So here again, like we said before, these two concepts are connected. The resist not evil and do not judge concepts are connected, and the explanation for how that works is right here. Let's see. To judge and to resist are different acts, but they are related, especially in the state. The former, that means to resist not evil, this former places more emphasis on legislation and the judicial system, and the latter, which is the judging part, on the police force and the army. Either way, they both criticize functions of the state which are fundamental to its existence. They both inform the Christian anarchist position. So in other words, resisting evil is forbidden as well as judging. So we should stay away from anything that has to do with courts. What he says is Christians must stay clear of human courts. And the reason why we should do that is precisely because of that they are human. They are not of God. Okay, so that was a little chapter about not to judge. The next chapter is Love Your Enemies. And that is a bit longer, but it is very, very important chapter. So it is quite possible that you may have to chop that up in a few sessions as well. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to being with you again next week.